In this training segment, we're going to introduce you to a really indispensable strength tool. A lot of people sort of shy away from them because they don't understand them, but the way that we're going to show you how to use them, it's very, very simple, very intuitive, and it's going to, particularly if you've followed along with us on our suspension training series, this is really just going to be the next level in your training evolution, because as strong as you can get with those, you really need to progress to the rings to get full mastery of your body weight, moving your weight through space. If you need some rationale as to why you should train with rings, look at a champion gymnast. Their musculature is without parallel in athletics, and there's a reason for that. The rings allow you to train all directions of movement, and while doing so with maximum muscular tension, which is really sort of the secret sauce of muscle development. Now, we're not going to do anything that's complicated. We're not going to do anything that requires actual gymnastic technique. We're simply going to use their tools and incorporate them into basic strength training movements. So stay with us. Now, one question I get frequently is from people who own suspension training equipment and train with suspension training equipment, and they'll say, can't I continue to use my suspension training equipment and just do the exercises that you show with the rings? The short answer is no, and there's a reason for that. With a suspension trainer, the way they're constructed, they're essentially an inverted Y, and there's an attachment point. You cannot get inside of those straps, which is really necessary for a lot of the pushing motions that we use with the rings. So if you can see right now, Sam can very comfortably stand inside of the rings, which allows him to perform a variety of movements which just really don't work mechanically based on the construction features of the suspension trainer. Now, we're going to start off this series. This is the pushing series. We're eventually working towards a vertical push, which is sort of the same linear motion of a push-up or of a bench press, but we're using the rings because that adds another level of complexity and muscular challenge, because again, we're training the entire body at once. You have to keep the body tight and under control, under your direct control, to perform these movements. You are able to perform them with the widest possible variety and range of motion. If you think about things like push-up handles, which are basically designed to give you a bigger stretch in the bottom position of a push-up, the rings can do that and more. The other great thing about the rings is they don't require you, like say a barbell or many exercise machines, to stay in one fixed position. We're all built differently, different shoulder widths, different limb lengths, and different leverage points relative to where our muscles attach to our bones. So each machine doesn't really fit everyone with an equal level of comfort. The rings fit everybody exactly the same, perfectly, because they simply adjust to the dimensions of your own body. So we're going to start here with a very easy push. We'll just assume for the moment that Sam is new to training and he's training towards achieving a full ring push-up, but we've got his body adjusted well back so that it's within the performance capability of a fitness beginner, and it looks just like this. He's going to keep his arms close into his body. He's keeping his body tight. He's pivoting on his toes because he's facing forward rather than pivoting on his heels with previous exercises that you've seen. And everything else just looks like a mechanically correct push-up. This is variation 1. We're now set for variation 2, and the only real difference is we've simply dropped the rings further down to the floor, which changes the angle relationship of Sam's body, which increases the amount of body weight that he's going to be pushing as he performs this variation. All of his body mechanics stay constant. The only thing different is this is more weight. It's more of Sam's actual weight that he pushes. And it looks like this. Variation 2. Okay, we're now set for variation 3. This is a full-on ring push-up. You can see just how close the rings are to the floor, almost all the way down, but just enough of a space left so that the rings still want to move, and Sam has to work hard to keep them rigid and exactly where he needs them to be so he can correctly perform the exercise. It's going to look just like a push-up, only better. Here we go. Variation 3, the full ring push-up. So here we are with the pulling series using the rings. And again, the rings are just a little bit more versatile than the suspension trainer because of the positions that they allow you to assume. You can get inside of the rings, which not only helps with the pushing as well as the pulling, as you'll see in a moment. And you can set these on a tree branch, playground equipment, a power rack like we're doing here, high enough that you can actually perform a full-on pull-up when you develop that level of strength. And that's important because anytime you can do pull-ups, you're developing a really strong back. A strong back is essential for punching power. Having the linkage all the way from the hands to the back, to the hips, to the legs, everything as strong as it can be, as mobile as it can be, working on your technique, grooving those patterns over and over and over until everything is just effortless because you have so much strength that it just comes on demand whenever you need it. But we have to build that strength. We're going to build that strength right now. So what Sam's going to do is he's going to position himself nice and strong, tight. All good training is core training. So his body is one straight line. He's going to be on his heels, which is just going to translate even more tension into all of these muscles here. He's going to pull his shoulders way back. You'll notice his palms are facing. He's going to pull with his elbows. He's going to activate all those strong back muscles, which is where your punching power comes from. And this is, believe it or not, our entry-level version. This is like the start of our pulling progression. You adjust it to you wherever you're strong right now. So if you need to be a little bit more upright to start, that's fine. If you can handle being a little more angled, that's great too. Ultimately, we're going to take the rings and we're going to get you to the point where you can do a legit ring pull-up. We're ready now for variation 2. This is similar to that suspension training body row you saw when Sam's body was almost parallel with the floor. We're assuming now that you've developed a bit more strength and you are up to the challenge of this position. So Sam is going to safely move himself into that position, and he's walking himself forward and staying on heels, shoulders back as always, body straight as always, and he's pulling himself straight up off the floor towards the ceiling, basically pulling his chest towards his hands on the rings. And this is your next variation. So here we are. We're ready for an actual full-on ring pull-up. We told you we'd get you here. Here we are right now. Now, even if you're strong enough to do pull-ups right now, the regular way on a conventional bar, I really encourage you to try out rings. And the reason for that is that rings will take so much stress off of your wrists, off of your elbows, and off of your shoulders because the rings move with you. You're not staying on an artificial plane of movement, which for some people, not a big deal. I'm one of those people that even in my 20s, doing lots and lots of pull-ups really became an issue for my wrists and elbows. When I started using rings, all of those problems went away. I'm 54, still use rings all of the time, really because of the comfort value that they afford me, as well as the fact that very, very effective for training. So Sam is set up here. We've got a good height. We've checked for head clearance. We don't want to injure ourselves when we're training. And again, you can put these rings on any overhead apparatus, be it a rafter, a tree branch, playground equipment, weight room equipment, anything that is going to safely support your weight, you can use rings. They're a great tool. So here we are. We're going to do a couple of pull-ups. Now, because the rings are a little bit lower, he's starting with his knees bent, but he's still going to pull his entire body weight up off of the floor in a controlled motion. You want to look just like this. You want to look this controlled and this balanced on your repetitions. Full ring pull-ups. This next progression is a trunk extension progression, and it's basically a way to really challenge the abdominal wall while also training the back muscles in a way that's very effective that most people don't find the means to accomplish. And it also strengthens the shoulder girdle. So that's three things that are sort of disparate sounding, but they're all happening at the same time. Anybody who's ever sort of marveled at the muscular development of a gymnast, some of that development is really the result of all of the straight arm work they do, the positions that they do while maintaining straight arms and putting tension on the back muscles, which make their backs, particularly dense, particularly detailed with that muscular development. So there's going to be a considerable amount of work going on with the back. And this exercise, even starting with the easier variations, there's more going on than you can actually see because there's not a lot of movement taking place. But it's really about the muscular stabilization that is required to do these positions, whether they're at the beginner level or even the more advanced levels. To do them correctly takes a lot of control and a lot of strength. And a lot of that strength is taking place in the most pivotal areas for the combat athlete, you know, strong midsection, strong back, strong shoulders. You know, you can take punishment and you can redeliver punishment of your own. So this is the first variation. The rings are up fairly high, and Sam is simply going to tip forward. His arms are going to be straight, and watch how he comes out, extends, and pauses and comes back. So out, pause, and return. If you can recall those old exercise wheels, we're using the rings to sort of simulate that same motion, but we build up to it. The exercise wheel, you have to jump in at the deep end, which means they're not effective for most people. With the rings, we can continue to adjust them further and further down, closer to the floor, increasing the intensity of the exercise as we go. This is variation 1. All right, variation 2, the main thing that we've done is we've simply dropped the rings further down, which means that Sam is going to be responsible for controlling more of his body weight on this variation. Everything else is going to play out just as we've seen before. So he rolls out, palms are facing, arms are straight, nice and controlled. Look at all the muscular activation going on in the shoulder region, the back. Your abs have to be extremely tight so that you don't flex forward or even fall. And you come up on your toes, and you can even push into the rings and get just a little bit more of a contraction in that position. Variation 2. Okay, here's our last variation on the rollout movement. Now, when I say first variation, second variation, third variation, understand that's just what we're showing you. When you're dealing with suspension training or you're dealing with rings, you have infinite number of variations possible, so that you can very incrementally build up to any of the finished movements that we're showing you. We're just going first, second, and third simply because it's more expedient in the format of these instructional videos. So this is ultimately where this exercise leads us to, where the rings are basically just up off the floor, and you're going to be in full trunk extension at the apex or the completion of the movement. So here we go. As you're doing this, make sure, again, your palms are facing. It'll stack your joints. It'll make it much easier to hold the position straight and come all the way out and all the way back. Notice that Sam is not rushing this. If you do this really fast, you can go in and out very quickly, do a lot of repetitions, and it may seem like you're doing a lot, but you're not doing a lot if you're not making the muscles do the work. They need to be supporting you in the entirety of this position. You need to have muscular tension throughout in order to develop muscular strength throughout this entire range of motion. This is the full variation of the ring rollout. It's important to understand why you're using the tool that you're using. If you're using the ropes, if you're using a suspension trainer, if you're using rings, there's a reason that we're advocating particular tools and not other tools. All of those tools have some common threads, and those common threads are all common to combat athletics. All of those tools require that you keep your mind on what you're doing at all times. You can't just mindlessly perform rep after rep using ropes if you've got all of those different variations that you know you're responsible for, that your coach may be calling out for, some of which require a lot of coordination and precision to execute correctly. You can't perform mindless reps on a suspension trainer. You've got too much body control to be concerned about. You've got the same issue with ring training of body control plus balance too. You've got to keep yourself stationary in as much as you can as you move your body through space performing those exercises if you're going to do it correctly. If you can do those things, if you can be mindful of yourself throughout your training, regardless of the tools that we use, and the tools that we all use are not sophisticated in terms of complexity, they're sophisticated in terms of application. They're simple tools, we just use them in a very sophisticated manner. We encourage you to try all of those tools out. Continue making yourself as strong as you possibly can be. No combat athlete can ever be too strong. And fire away at your training. Think about the mental training that we cover and ways of integrating that into your training regimen. To stay in touch with what I'm doing, make sure that you visit MikeGillette.com, blog content, video content, all designed specifically to encourage you on your quest to become and remain the strongest combat athlete you can possibly be. I'm Mike Gillette. We'll see you next time.